All right, everyone, it is 12:02, so we can go ahead and get started. Welcome to our last GPS STEM event for the 2023. And my name is Joanne. I'm the Program Director for Graduate Professional Success for STEM PhDs and postdocs at UC Irvine. If you don't know me, hello, welcome in. But I will share a little bit about the event, introduce our speaker, and then I will pass it along to our speaker to take us off. So for our main show today, if you have not joined a Life Beyond PhD seminar before, welcome in. This seminar series really focuses on celebrating the end of one journeys for careers and STEM workforce pathways. This is a fireside style chat, really intended to be informal and casual to give you a chance to be able to explore various careers, identify those critical skills that you want to start working on before you sort of graduate or move on from your postdoc, and to be able to connect with someone who is in that industry of interest. So today we have our speaker, Dr. Chanel Rain Smith. I apologize for butchering that.
You're
CMPP.
okay.
She completed her PhD in molecular and medical genetics at the Oregon Health and Science University in 2010. She then moved on to a postdoctoral fellowship in hematology and oncology at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. After her postdoc, she joined White Cell Innovations in 2012 and is now a principal medical writer and consultant. She's still working on her professional development, where she earned her in 2023, she earned her certification for medical publication professional. So topics today will include sort of what is medical writing and consulting, what does that look like, how is that different from academic publications, her specific career pathway, skill sets that are required to be successful, and how folks can pursue a similar pathway. I greatly encourage folks to drop in your questions into the chat. Chantel, if you see them and you want to answer them, go ahead. If not, I will continue to collect them until the end when you're done telling your story. So please give a warm welcome to our speaker. Thank you so much for joining us.
Sure, and thank you, Joanne. And I'm very happy to be here. Like Joanne said, this is super informal, so please interrupt me anytime if you have questions or want to know more about something that I'm talking about. So I'll just give you guys a little bit of background on myself, where I came from and how I got to where I am today. And then we can go into a little bit more about kind of what my day-to-day is like as a medical writer. So way back when I was in college, I thought I wanted to be a clinician, like a lot of people, especially back in the day when I went to college. I'm not going to date myself, but there was not a lot of knowledge about careers other than being an MD. When you went to college, you were either pre-med or you were not a scientist. And while I was at college, one of my professors was like, "Oh, wow, have you ever thought about doing research?" And I had not, but I decided to try it out over the summer and I loved it. So I ended up going to grad school instead of medical school, which is a really good thing because I learned that I'm not really good in high pressure situations that involve bodily fluids. After graduating from college, I went to grad school in Oregon, as Joanne said, and I worked in a lab where we studied benign hematology. So I just said I didn't like bodily fluids, but apparently I'm fine when it's from animals and not humans. So yeah. So we when I was in graduate school, as most graduate school advisors do, our advisors know how to make you a copy of them. They're really trained to train you to be the next them, which is wonderful. I had a wonderful, wonderful advisor, and I did my work, did my thesis, and then I decided that I wasn't exactly sure what I wanted to do with my life, but a postdoc seemed like it would keep all of my options open. So then I did my postdoctoral fellowship at UNC in the Center for Thrombosis and Hemostasis, and I had a wonderful postdoctoral mentor there who was super supportive. But again, he was trained to train me to become an academic. So that's what he did. And in my postdoc, I found that I really didn't love the bench work anymore, but what I really liked was all the stuff that went with reporting my results, talking about my results, publishing my results, getting more scientific information out there, editing, things like that. So I was the person that, people in our department brought their papers to before they submitted because they're like, "Oh, you're good at that editing and you have a real knack for words. So can you look at my paper? So I ended up being that person, which I was like, that's really interesting. But, my career is as a scientist, as a researcher, and probably to have my own lab someday because that's kind of what I was trying to do. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that that wasn't the path that I wanted. So I ended up going to the Career Center at UNC and talking to one of the career counselors there about my other options, which at that time I really didn't know what those were. But upon kind of talking to the counselor and using all the resources that she had at her disposal, I started looking into alternative career options for somebody who has a PhD. And one of the things that she made me aware of was a talk by a medical writer who came to UNC and gave a talk in person about, what is medical writing? What does a medical writer do? And I went to see this talk and I was like, oh, wow, like this blends my two interests perfectly. I love science. I do. I'm just not good at doing it. I don't have the best hands, barely scraped by in grad school postdoc, but I love writing about it and I love talking about it and I love sharing it with others. So this sounds like a really cool career. So as I was sitting through that seminar, this person who ended up being Robin Witzel, my company's name is Witzel Innovations, so Robin Witzel, it's her company. But she was talking about, her career as a medical writer and how she got into it. And then all of a sudden she says, and we have an internship program. And I was like, oh, okay. Well, I'm going to apply for that. And so I went and I talked to her afterwards and, she chatted with me and gave me the flyer for applying for the internship. But they told me, it's pretty competitive and we don't have a lot of slots. So I was like, all right, you know what? I'm probably not qualified for this. I've never done anything official for writing, other than write some papers, which everybody that comes out of grad school and postdoc has done. So it's not like I'm special. But I'm going to apply for this internship anyway. So I applied and I ended up getting an interview, which I thought I totally botched because they were asking me questions about like things that I didn't know how to do in Word and all kinds of things that were not science. And I was like, okay, I'm definitely not getting this internship. Apparently they saw something in me because 11 years later, here I am running the internship. But I'm very glad they did because this is definitely the right career for me. So that is just a little bit about my journey and how I came to be at WI. We called it Witzel WI. And so, yeah, I came up through our internship program. And at the end of the internship, I was offered full-time employment and I started as a medical writer and consultant. And then I worked my way up to senior medical writer. And now I am a principal medical writer and I run our internship program among some of the other internal programs that we have at WI. And so, here I am today. One of our biggest loves at WI is talking to other people about medical writing as a career because so many of us had no idea that it was an option when we started. And we want to make sure that other people know that this is a career option. And we want to make sure everybody kind of knows what it is and, gets to explore it if you think it might be a good fit for you. So do you guys have any questions about anything so far? Feel free to jump in, like I said, but I'll stop periodically.
Maybe I can ask the obvious question. What does medical writing do? What does that look like on a day-to-day basis?
Thank you, Joanne. What a great question. So medical writing it has many different kind of niches that you can fall into. So being a medical writer doesn't mean you do only one of those things, but in general, as a medical writer, you kind of focus on one type of writing, one type of medical writing. So there are medical writers who focus on, grants and things like that. There are medical writers who focus on writing for the public, so medical communications in terms of your grandma gets sick and you bring her to the hospital and they give her a pamphlet. A medical writer wrote that pamphlet. So information for patients and people who are not training or are not trained as a scientist. There are medical writers who write promotional material. So if you ever are watching TV and you see a commercial for, I don't know, Wegovy, and it's like, oh yay, this weight loss drug it's amazing, and then it's like side effects include like cerebral hemorrhage, death, your liver falls out. Medical writers write all of that, and that's like very highly regulated what you can and cannot say in those. So and then the branch of medical writing that we focus on at my company is regulatory medical writing. And so what we do is we write all of the technical documentation that needs to be submitted to health authorities like the FDA or the EMA in order to get a drug approved and marketed in different countries around the world. So we work with a lot of sponsor companies like biopharmaceutical companies, device companies, things like that. And this is another kind of highly regulated niche of medical writing where not only do we have to know how to write based on the data that we receive, but we also need to know all of the rules and regulations that go around writing what we do, because there are laws that we need to follow. There are guidances that we need to adhere to in order to create the documents and have them not only be in the layout that the health authority wants to see, but also be compliant with all of these types of guidelines. So being a medical writer can mean a lot of different things depending on what you specialize in. I do see some questions, so I'll go ahead and answer those. What trainings prepare one for medical writing? I'm already scientific, but not a medical writer. Yes. So training is something that a lot of people have said is hard to come by, because there's not a lot of formal training. There is more now these days than there used to be. So there are certain certificate programs that you can apply to get a certificate in medical writing. I know UCSD has one. I know, I think College of the Health Sciences in Philadelphia has one. So there are some certificate programs out there that will give you the training to become a medical writer. There are also programs online. There's a huge amount of training from the American Medical Writers Association, which is our professional organization that we belong to as medical writers. And you can get a certificate there. You can just take some self-study modules there. You can kind of self-pace the trainings there. And the nice thing about the American Medical Writers Association training is that it's not just one thing. You can kind of pick and choose from different types of writing that you want to explore, as well as other things like if you need to brush up on your biostats or you want to know more about something in Word, there are those types of courses as well. And then, is it possible to do it remotely? So my company is 100% remote. We always have been, even before the pandemic. From day one, we have never had a brick and mortar building. We work from wherever we are. So I just recently moved for the second time in 2 years. And my work didn't stop because I can work from anywhere. So as long as you have an internet connection and a phone, you can be a medical writer from anywhere. I always joke that I want to open the WI Italy office because that's where I want to work from. My headset fell off. So yes, so a lot of medical writing companies are fully remote and some have a hybrid option, but there is also the option to be a butt in a seat at a company who requires you to come in full time. So that is something that is a personal choice. If there are jobs available in any of those different types of working scenarios. What types of clients do you interact with? So me personally, doing regulatory writing, I interact every day very closely with pharmaceutical companies, specifically their clinical development teams. So I focus on the clinical regulatory side of things, which involves everything once you start putting a drug into humans. There is a preclinical, non-clinical side to that. That's a whole different set of documents that are based on animal models or anything that happens before it goes into humans. And we have a group that focuses on those documents. We have another group who focuses on more of the CMC type activity. So formulation of the drug, what does it look like? What are the excipients? What's the dosing regimen? Things like that. So for me personally, I interact a lot with the clinical teams just because that's the type of writing that I do most. We also interact with sometimes, not always, but we sometimes interact with health authorities on behalf of clients if we need to submit something to a health authority or something like that. We don't do that very often just because our clients usually have somebody internally who does all of that. And then we also interact with each other a ton. So when you think about how much time, effort, and information goes into a marketing application for a drug, there are teams of 10 to 15 medical writers that need to be writing all of these documents at the same time. So we interact with other medical writers within our own company, and then other medical writers within the sponsor company, or other contractors who the sponsor company might have contracted out to. And so we deal with a lot of people all the time, every day. And I joke that the hardest part of my job is not the writing, it's herding the cats, because there are just so many people from so many different functional areas and places and everything coming at you that, on the days when I don't have 20 meetings and I can sit down and write, I'm like, oh, this is pleasant. This is lovely. So that's kind of who we interact with. Let's see, how did you figure out what type of medical writing to specialize in? So that's a great question. So obviously coming out of postdoc and academia, I had published papers. I still write papers. We still work on publications, but they are based on clinical trial data. So they are a little bit more regulated than the research articles that came out of labs. But that was my start, and that's where I realized, okay, I really like this. But when I heard my now head of my company that I work for, Robin, talking about what regulatory medical writing was, I was like, oh, I really am interested in this. I'm interested in how a drug gets from an animal all the way to humans and then approved, and then what happens after that. That was just kind of a big black box for me. And it was something that I was really, really interested in. And I still am, because things change all the time. That is one of the nicest, coolest things about this industry, is that things are constantly changing. So you never feel stagnant. You never feel like you know everything, and you're just kind of doing your job and you're not learning and you're not growing. There's always something new, something different. They may have updated a guidance. They may have found a new drug for a disease that was previously untreated. So there's always something new to learn about, which I think is super cool. But for me, I realized I really loved regulatory writing when I went to the talk that my boss gave. That being said, I hadn't really, dipped my toes into too many of the other types. I had obviously written grants, which I hated in grad school and postdoc. It was not my jam. So I knew I didn't want to do that. And, but yeah, so I decided to do regulatory writing. And then once I started my internship and realized there were these kind of little different types of regulatory writing you can do, based on kind of what you want to focus on, it just took me trying it out. Oh, I'm going to work on this document. Oh, I really liked that one, but oh, I worked on this other one and didn't really enjoy that as much. So, and that was the nice thing about our company, is that they really let you choose your own adventure. So I'm like really old, and we used to have those choose your own adventure books where it's like turn to page 47 if you want to take the tunnel, turn to page 53 if you want to take the airplane. And I feel like that's kind of like my company. They're like, do you want to take the tunnel or the airplane today? And I'll be like, the tunnel, I guess. And they're like, great, here you go. That I think I got a lot of flexibility there to kind of figure that out for myself. Okay. Let's see, what other questions do you guys have? Is a postdoc necessary, helpful for a career in medical writing? Necessary? No. Even an advanced degree is not an absolute necessity. So the owner of my company does not have a PhD or an MD or a DVM or a terminal degree. And there are a good portion of our writers who do not either. The majority of us do have some kind of terminal degree, but I will say that the reason for that is because the singular most important thing that grad school and postdoc taught me, that I use literally every day in my job, is the ability to look at large quantities of data and to understand them, and to kind of be able to pick out what's important out of that data to discuss. And that's something that really, you do in grad school and you learn how to do, and then postdoc, really, that's kind of when you hone in on, how to present your data and pick out the bits and pieces that are the most important. And so that ability to just sit down with some data and analyze it and digest it, and and then kind of make sense of it is what I feel like I took from my postdoc the most that I use every day. But like I said, it's not a requirement at all. There are plenty of people who do not have advanced degrees and did not do a postdoc that are successful medical writers. Are there specific certifications that make one a medical writer? So no. Can you get certifications? Yes, there are plenty of them. So as I mentioned, the American Medical Writers Association has a certificate program that will get you, it's called an MWC, a medical writing certification. And then there are also other groups that also have their own different types of certification. So I have a CMPP, which is a certified medical publications professional, which focuses more on the publications and dissemination of information to non-scientific audiences. And then there are also regulatory groups, the Regulatory Affairs Society, RAPS. They have training that ends in a certificate in regulatory writing. So, and other regulatory issues. Hang on one second. I'm sorry. So yes, there are certificates and certifications that you can get, but there's nothing that says you have to have this thing to be a medical writer. So really what makes you a medical writer is getting into it, getting a foot in the door. And we always tell our interns when they start, right from right now, like you don't put that you're an intern on your LinkedIn. Like starting here, day one, you are a medical writer because you are learning and you are figuring it out and you are a medical writer. So from like the get-go. So it really is just about getting experience and that's it. There's no official training program that you need. I will tell you about the internship in a sec. Hang on. Is medical writing open to students in epidemiology or public health? Yes. So as long as you have a scientific background of some kind and you are comfortable with data, you're fine. We had, she's not here anymore, but one of our writers had a PhD in like female sexuality studies or something like that. I don't remember the exact name of it, but it was it wasn't a hard basic science. It was, I don't know exactly where it fell, but you don't need to have like a chemistry, biology, biochemistry. It can be anything related to health that, again, as long as you are comfortable like looking and reading and summarizing data, totally fine. Okay. What writing samples do you need to show at the time of job application? Okay, that's a good question. So usually the company that you are applying for a job will ask you to do a writing assessment. You won't need to provide your own writing assessments, although they might ask you to submit like a paper or, excuse me, when I applied for our internship, I submitted a book chapter I had written for a textbook. Yeah, so if you have papers that you've written or things like that, you can always submit them. But a lot of times companies will ask you, hey, here's a journal article. Can you summarize it for me in one page and then have it back to me whenever their date is. So let's see. Do you have any advice on finding or landing entry-level medical writing roles coming out of a PhD? So I think for me personally, I would highly recommend looking into internships. We're not the only company that has an internship. There are plenty of companies that have internships. For me, I obviously love ours because I came through it. But ours is a one-on-one mentor type of role. So you got a lot of personal attention. I don't know a lot about other medical writing internships that are out there. I don't really know many people personally who have done them. But there are plenty out there. So if you just Google medical writing and internship, you'll find a lot of good resources out there. And a lot, from what I understand, a lot of the programs are structured pretty similarly. You go through the same kind of documents and preparations and learning and curriculum to kind of learn more about the field and understand it. The other thing I would say is if you're really interested in becoming a medical writer, join the American Medical Writers Association. They have chapters all over the country, and they, depending on, for you guys, there's California, so you guys are in Spot, you have multiple chapters. But there are free events to go to all the time. Sometimes they're educational events, sometimes they're just networking events. And I would highly, highly, highly recommend going to the networking events and just talk to different people about what kind of medical writing they do. Do they like it? What kind of company do they work for? What's their day-to-day like? And just start picking people's brains, and you never know who you're going to meet. So I go to these networking things all the time, and if somebody applies for the internship and I know they're a rock star because I've talked to them before at a networking thing, like, it's awesome because I'm like, yes, I know this person's really great. I think they'd be a great fit. I'm so glad they applied. So just network the heck out of it. And other, professional associations, like I said, there are plenty within our field that, if you want a little bit more focused kind of niche thing, you can definitely join those too and go to their free events and just talk to people. So definitely reach out to people. And I will tell you that I've never met a medical writer who is not willing to talk to you about their story, because I would say probably like 95% of us had no idea this was going to be our career when we started out. So we're always happy to kind of tell you the story. Have I ever done freelance work? No, I haven't. I came right out of my postdoc, did the internship, and then joined full-time here at WI. So I have not done freelancing. However, AMWA, the American Medical Writers Association, I'm just going to call it AMWA from now on. They have a really large group of freelancers. So if it's something you're really serious about, you can join AMWA as a member, which costs money, but it's not that expensive. And then you'll have access to all of their message boards, all of their chat groups, all of their kind of, they have a whole freelance board of people either looking for freelance work or people looking for someone to do freelance work. So if freelancing sounds good to you, I would highly recommend, joining AMWA and connecting with people there. Okay, let's see. Hang on a second. Do you think getting into the field the same way you did is feasible nowadays, and is more preparation required now? Is medical writing a job that's easy to transition to from another writing-based career like research and development? So I will say that I always joke that if I applied for our internship now, I wouldn't get it. And it's funny, but like, it's kind of not. So I think that, 11 years ago when I applied for the internship, medical writing was a little bit still like an unknown. And now so many people know about it, which is wonderful, but that just makes things a little bit more competitive. But that's not a bad thing, right? So I think getting into the field the same way I did is definitely the way to go. I think finding an internship at a company that you feel like you fit in well with and is a program that you enjoy is really, really important, because you get that mentored aspect. It's not just getting thrown to the wolves like, all right, I decided to be a freelancer, here's my first job, I hope it goes well. It's more like guidance, mentoring. You have somebody looking at your stuff before it goes to someone, or you have somebody there to ask questions. So I think an internship, the way that I did it, is still the way to go. And I obviously did not transition from another kind of industry related job, so I'm not sure, but it seems like from my colleagues who have done that the transition was pretty smooth. So I have colleagues that have come from preclinical development, clinical development. We have some MDs on staff who have come from clinical practice. We have veterinarians that have come from clinical practice, and everybody's transition has been pretty smooth. So it seems like it's not a terrible transition, but I can't speak to that directly just because that was not where I came from. Let's see. Whoops, sorry. Just scrolling down. Can you speak to any other type of scientific or technical writing careers? Is there overlap in terms of career path and skill set? Yes. So, like I said, my experience is mostly regulatory, but there is a ton of other stuff out there. So science journalism, writing for newspapers and magazines about things that are happening in science is super related, and is sometimes even more difficult because you have to take all of that scientific information and distill it down and then write about it in a way that the masses will be able to read it and understand it. And that's something that is really difficult for some of us who are so scientific and are so used to just throwing the jargon around as much as we possibly can, to really think about, okay, if my dad, who is a businessman, read this, would he understand it? Or if my grandma, who's going to take this heart medication but has been a stay-at-home mom her whole life, would she understand this? But there's a lot of overlap. I do think that it's a very similar skill set. It's taking information or taking data and really writing about it for a targeted audience, which is what all medical writers do. It just so happens that the audience is a little bit different. Okay. Oh, Joanne, you are on top of it. Thank you. How about speakers of English as a second language? Do you recommend additional training? So, if you are fluent, if you can read and speak English fluently, then no, I wouldn't recommend anything more. If you feel like you need some help, maybe, just a little bit of reminder or some brushing up, AMWA, again, is a great resource for that. They have a lot of resources for people who English is not their first language. But in general, if you can speak and write fluently in English and, you're enrolled in a program and you do everything in English, then that shouldn't be a hindrance. Okay, can you explain the consulting part of your job? Yes, my consulting hat, I put it on. So we always say that we wear a couple of hats. We wear many hats at WI. So obviously we write, we're writers. We're cat herders. I have my cat herding hat. I wear that way too much. And then, the consulting piece is what we do when we are the experts at understanding the rules and the regulations around the type of writing we are doing. So for me in particular, because I do a lot of clinical regulatory writing, I have to be the expert in the rules, which are the Code of Federal Regulations that govern what I write, as well as the international guidances that also provide recommendations for the different types of documents that we write. So the consulting part of that is when a team comes to me and maybe this is their first submission or this is their first time writing a clinical study report or something like that, and they're like, yay, here, we have data, like, write this thing for us. And you have to be like, oh, no. Okay, let me take it down a notch. So then you have to explain to them, here is how we have to do it. Here are the best practices for doing it. Here is what the health authority is going to be looking for. Here are the things that you probably should have already done but didn't, so might want to go back and do before we submit this, and things like that. So a lot of our consulting is just us knowing all of the rules, regulations, and guidances around the documents that we write and being able to help our teams understand why we should do things a certain way. Okay, is it okay to use AI and ChatGPT in medical writing? If yes, do you usually use? Whew, is that a loaded question? Right now, I am not permitted to use AI in my job. However, that will change. So this is such a new and emerging field that it's kind of like the Wild West a little bit right now. But the problem is, so if you think about, especially for me and regulatory writing, I get super, super, super confidential information to the point where, like, I have legal training for my clients that I have to go through in order to even look at their data. If I put any of that into ChatGPT and put that out into the universe, there goes my job, my life, everything. So for regulatory writing, generally, we don't use AI. We don't put client data into anything. If I'm writing a manuscript and I just want it to summarize what is known on the topic of, I don't know, AML, let's say, that is something that people do. However, everything that comes out of AI still needs to be checked by a human. So AI right now, like ChatGPT, is known to provide references that don't actually exist. It might over or underemphasize certain points that shouldn't be. So while it is a useful tool to get that output, it still requires a human being with knowledge of the subject to go through and say, okay, this makes sense, and to verify all of the sources. There are, of course, in what we do, rules and regulations around the use and acknowledgement of the use of AI. So right now, if you're writing a journal article, I would say I don't even know what percentage, but a lot of journals now have AI statements that need to go into your either your abstract or somewhere in your manuscript when you submit it, that say, if you did use AI, it has a kind of a boilerplate statement that says, AI was used to do this, that, and the other thing in this manuscript. So, excuse me, I personally do not use AI because I am not allowed to in my work. I have dabbled with it like outside of work. So I asked it to write a rap song about my company for our company retreat, and it was hilarious. But I do not use it for work. Okay, let's see. Do you get to decide what general areas that you write about? Oncology, devices, etc. Yes. So especially at my company, like I said, it's kind of choose your own adventure. We have a whole device team who really loves writing about devices. And it's something that we have everybody explore. Everybody gets to work on a device project when they come to our company. And then if you really love it, you can join Team Device if you want. I wrote one document on contact lenses and was like, this is not for me. But there's a ton of different types of writing in terms of device versus drug. There's also, like you mentioned, a lot of different therapeutic areas. And I think for me and where I work, that is the other coolest part of my job. So we being just a medical writing company, we get therapeutic areas across the board, like spanning from oncology, hematology, neurology, ophthalmology, gynecology, urology, nephrology, like you name it, we write about it. And I think that that is part of what makes our job so cool and not monotonous, is that we get the chance to work on so many different therapeutic areas. We don't get siloed into one thing. It's not like, oh, Chantel's background is cardiology, so everything cardiology goes to Chantel and she doesn't get to work on anything else. No, it's like, oh, hey, this cardiology thing came in. Chantel, do you want this? And I can say, I'd really like to work on oncology this time. And they'll be like, okay, we'll give it to somebody else. And I've only worked at one place, so I don't know how it's like at other places, but I do know from interacting with a lot of colleagues and friends at pharmaceutical companies that sometimes you do get siloed. You get siloed on a program or a therapeutic area or even a document type. I have a friend who only writes phase 3 CSRs. That's it, clinical study reports. Whereas I write protocols, investigator brochures, clinical study reports, risk management plans, manuscripts, this, that, the other thing. So again, when you're thinking about a career in medical writing, you have to think about, what if you're okay being siloed, and people are, and people aren't, and that is okay either way. But it does happen. Hang on. Do different types of medical writers come with different salaries, or it just depends on the company you work for and the type of writing doesn't matter? So that's a really great question. So it definitely depends on who you work for. So if you're a freelancer, you set your rates. If you work for a humongous pharmaceutical company, you might make more than if you work for a startup biotech company. So it really depends on the company you work for. It obviously depends on your level of expertise as well. So coming in the door, I came in the door so long ago, I don't even have a clue what entry level medical writers make these days, but I would say that, pharmaceutical companies will generally pay pretty well coming through the door. I know companies like mine or other contract organizations are comparable to that as well. And I don't know freelance at all, so I can't really speak to that. So, and then of course, regulatory writing versus promotional writing versus grant writing. Yes, the salaries are a little different. And again, that usually depends on where you work. So if you're doing a lot of grant writing, you might work for an academic institution. You might be working for a big hospital or a cancer center or something like that, versus if I were a pharmaceutical company, and, academic institutions are, usually more grant funded, and maybe the salaries are commensurate with that. So it definitely depends on where you work. I would say that the type of writing isn't so much different. But again, I've focused on one thing for so long that I'm not super current on, science journalism versus regulatory medical writing. Okay, I do want to answer this one. Do you have a healthy work-life balance? I personally do, because it is a priority of my company. So when I joined, I didn't realize what a cool company I was joining, but our number one culture, I don't know the right word, thing, is a focus on work-life balance. So literally, like I'm a 40-hour week person. Like that's my contract says you should work 40 hours a week. I'm like, okay, great. If I work like 45 hours one week, my boss will be on the phone with me on Monday morning being like, why did you work 45 hours? Why did you work on the weekend? Is everything okay? You just wanted to get it done and you had time? Okay, that's fine. But I just wanted to check in on you and make sure that you weren't burning yourself out. Whereas, other places, I don't know, maybe the bosses wouldn't make that call. Or maybe you'd be working a lot more. It just depends on kind of where you work. But for me personally, I have a very healthy work-life balance. The other reason for that is because I work remotely. So literally today at 1:15, I got a call from my son's school saying he had a fever and he needed to come home. And my husband works as a butt in a seat 45 minutes away. So he's obviously not going to get him. But because I work from home and I live 5 minutes from his school, I just got in the car and went. And I just threw my boss a message on our message thing and said, hey, my son is sick. I have to go get him. She's like, all right, cool. See you tomorrow. So I think that, you have to find what works best for you and your family. And whatever that is, just, that can evolve over time too. So when I started medical writing, I wasn't married. I didn't have a kid. I didn't have a dog. I didn't have anything. It was just me. So it was really easy to work 70 hours a week, even though, nobody told me I had to. And I didn't really, I never worked 70 hours a week. But, if I wanted to, like, there was nothing in my way. Now it's a completely different ballgame. And I feel like as it has evolved, I've had to reevaluate my work-life balance. And so, sometimes I work weird hours just to make sure I get my time in. So I'll get up at 5 every day to get an hour and a half of work in before I have to get up and get the kid ready for school. And then, if I don't have all my hours in at the end of the week, maybe I'll work late one night just to make sure I'm hitting my goals. Or if I have something due, I'll work, over a weekend. But that's my choice. Nobody's telling me I have to. So I definitely have a good work-life balance. So in terms of remote work structure, do you find it makes herding cats easier or more difficult? Oh, both. Um, so I used to work for a company where every now and then they would fly me up to their office just so I could like see the people that I was working with because I was working with them on a big project. And I will say there is something to be said for being able to get out of a cubicle, walk 2 cubicles over and be like, dude, I need the thing. You were supposed to give me the thing yesterday. I need the thing. As opposed to like gentle emails 73 times a day and then finally being like, oh, I'm going to have to pick up the phone and then like cold call them. And so there are drawbacks to not being kind of in a place with the other people that you're working with. However, you work around it. So for me, a lot of my clients have systems where I get to be integrated into them. So it's either a VPN or I get a laptop or something like that. So I'm in all their systems. So if Joe in Cubicle 7 didn't get me the thing, I can't get up and be like, Joe, come on, dude. But I can use their internal messaging system 500 times until Joe gets back to me. And I'd be like, Joe, I see your dots. I see you're there. I see you're typing. Like, So you just have to kind of figure out how to do it with each client and each client team. And, that all comes with some more like official things. Like we have communication plans with our teams, which at the outset of a project, you outline, here's how I plan to communicate with you. How would you like to communicate with me? And then by person, functional area, like, okay, Joe, would you prefer if I needed something that I send you a message on the instant messenger or that I call you or that I text you on your personal phone? And person by person, they'll tell you how to get a hold of them. And you kind of keep track of all that. And so there are all these official ways to help with that too. But really, it's good and bad. Sorry, my accent just came out. Oh, New York. Okay, let's see. Do people mostly, oops, sorry, I lost it again. It's like every time somebody puts a new question in, it goes away. Do people mostly do their internship after completion of their degree or while they're doing their degree? And how long does the internship last? Okay, so I'll tell you a little bit about our internship. So our internship is designed for people who have something else going on. Our ideal candidates are people who are finishing a postdoc and want to transition out of the lab into industry, or people who are in a related area of industry that want to switch into medical writing. That being said, anybody can apply to our internship, grad students, postdocs, other types of students. Generally, undergrads are not really encouraged to apply just because that, you need to have that like data mining in grad school that we like. But so, wow, where was I going with that? Sorry, my mind just is a sieve today. So while we are looking for those types of people, it is designed to work around somebody who has either a full-time job or a full-time postdoc. So our minimum commitment for our internship is 10 hours a week, and that can be nights, weekends, early mornings. The only thing is once a week we have a 1-hour educational session that we ask everybody to be present for. That's in the middle of the day on a Wednesday. Other than that, you kind of set your own schedule with your mentor. You let them know when you're available to work. They'll let you know when they're available to help you, and then you kind of work it out with them. So it's very, very flexible. And again, it's designed for people who are on that transition. We generally, in terms of people who are finishing up their degree, our biggest concern is that we don't derail anyone from finishing their degree. So, we definitely accept applications from people who are doing their PhD, but we would prefer it that you're a little bit further along towards, thinking about defending, just because we don't want to get in the way of what you need to do to finish your degree and your studies. And then for us, the internship, it can be anywhere from 12 to 18 months. So 18 months for us is kind of the typical track that people take. And then we have an accelerated option for people who maybe they were finishing up their postdoc and then they finished and now they have a whole bunch more time to devote to internship. They can accelerate. So maybe it'll only take them 14 months instead of 12. Okay, so the internship, I know there's a lot of questions here, so I'll just kind of run through it with everybody. So it is a paid internship. And it does not have benefits because it is an internship. But you do get paid a competitive rate, and you're, depending on how many hours a week you work. We generally ask that people who want to come and do our internship have, the appropriate scientific background, obviously, but really just a strong desire to learn about medical writing, and especially at our company, we do focus mostly on regulatory writing. So learning about that type of writing in a regulated environment, and in addition to just learning how to write, you'll also learn all about all of the, I'm going to air quote because I hate it, soft skills that go along with our job. So herding the cats, communicating with teams, setting up meetings, kicking off a document, closing out a document, all the things that go along with the actual writing piece, which, like I said, is most of the battle. It's not the writing that's the hard part, it's all of the other things. And so like I mentioned, it's a minimum 10-hour week commitment, but it can be more than that if someone has more time to devote. It's one-on-one mentored, so you're assigned an experienced medical writer who is your primary point of contact, but you do get to work with a ton of different people in our company because after a certain point, we call it farming out. We farm out our interns. Basically, we want to get you exposed to a number of different writers because everybody does things a little bit differently. And we want everybody to see there's not only one way to do everything. So you take kind of bits and pieces from all the people you work with, and then you kind of go from there. Okay, let's see. Is it appropriate and legal to work for more than one company as a full-time medical writer? No. So generally, even our interns have to sign confidentiality agreements. They have to sign non-disclosures. There's all this legal stuff that goes along with being able to look at a client's data or look at even what we do internally at WI. So in general, even for our interns, we scrutinize any potential conflicts of interest. So in general, if you're a full-time medical writer at one company, you're not typically kind of freelancing on the side or something like that. Let's see. Sorry, scrolling. Do you see yourself continuing in medical writing or transitioning to other career paths? Is there satisfactory upward mobility? Yes. So as I mentioned, I've been here for 10 years, 11 years, and I went from being an intern to running the internship. And my company has been great at saying, what do you want to do? So we have 2 tracks within our company. You can manage people or you can manage things. I always joke that I don't like people, so I manage things. So I manage programs, I manage documents, I write a lot of our bigger documents. I work with more complex teams, whereas our managers actually manage teams of people. So I have a manager, even though I've been here longer than some of the managers, but that's because I don't want to manage people. So there are different tracks you can take as a medical writer, depending on what you want to do. And there is upward mobility. So for me, I consistently have moved up in my career. Where I'm at right now in my company, the next steps, I don't exactly know what those are because we're kind of making it up as we go a little bit because I'm one of the few that didn't go into the managing people side. So, but there is plenty of upward mobility, especially if you work at a larger pharmaceutical company. There's also, especially when you work at other or larger pharmaceutical companies, there's the potential for lateral moves. So if you're like, well, I love clinical development, but I don't really love medical writing, I think this other thing is really cool. There is potential for that as well. Although I don't know why you wouldn't love medical writing, but yeah. So there's so many options. Are there medical writing opportunities for policymakers? Yes. So I have a friend from grad school who actually did an internship. After she did our internship, she did an internship in DC doing policy stuff. And that is pretty much the extent of what I know about it. But the answer to that is yes, there are opportunities. I just am not well versed in what those are, but I know that they exist. Oh, okay. That was the last question. Okay. So yeah, so that's kind of it. Joanne posted the website for our internship. You can also email me. We have an internship website address or email address. It's just internship@witzellinnovations.com. That goes to me and my ops colleague who runs the internship with me from the ops side. So if you have any questions or anything like that, you can let me know. We also have an upcoming informational seminar on January, I don't know, 14th, 17th, something like that. I'll have to look it up. But that talks about kind of more the details about what we write about in the different documents and then a little bit more about our internship program. So you're all welcome to join in that if you'd like. And that will be a little bit more information. But like I said, I'm always happy to chat further. If you want to shoot me an email or anything, you can connect with me on LinkedIn anytime. Feel free. Or, Joanne can give you my work email. It's just Chantel Ryan Smith at witzellinnovations.com. But I'm happy to answer questions. I love talking about what I do, and I love, hearing from people about what they like to do and trying to help figure out what your career path should be or looks like, because I know I was in the same place struggling to figure it all out. So
Awesome. Thank you so much, Chantel. Can everyone
you're
please
so
drop
welcome.
in some applause? Thank you.